And a good Saturday morning, everyone. Today on Perspectives, we talk about domestic violence awareness in our community. In just the last 2 weeks, we here at Fox 10 News have reported to you on several domestic violence incidents, some deadly, others where the victims received serious injuries. Surprisingly, maybe to some of us, the cases are not just where a man assaulted a female victim, which the majority of domestic violence cases are. In recent incidents, though, women have been accused now of killing or assaulting their man with a gun or a knife. In most cases, the woman was the wife, girlfriend, or ex-girlfriend. In another case, a father was accused of shooting his son. And in a recent case, a niece was arrested for allegedly shooting her aunt. Now, what was once considered by some as isolated cases of abuse back in the late 1900s have now become a shocking national problem. Police intervention can often escalate the violence without disrupting what experts call that cycle of abuse. Now, according to the California Health Report, 40% of domestic violence survivors never contact the police. In Mobile County, some people, though, they turn to the Penelope House for help. Penelope House is a domestic violence service. They provide help for people dealing with domestic abuse. They provide safety, protection, and support to the victims of domestic violence and their children. Penelope House helps victims gain social and economic independence through shelter, counseling, advocacy, and referral to community resources and agencies. Our guests this morning on Perspectives, Tony Ann Torrens, Executive Director of the Penelope House, and Detective Zandra Jackson of the Mobile County Sheriff's Office. Detective Jackson is with the Criminal Investigation Domestic Violence Unit. After a quick break this morning, we'll talk with our guests, Tony Ann Torrens and Detective Zandra Jackson, about domestic violence in our community here on the Gulf Coast and how are existing organizations and their programs helping, as well as how is law enforcement handling the potentially dangerous and deadly situations when they're called on scene. Perspectives continues in just a moment. And welcome back to Perspectives. This morning, our very special guests, Tony Ann Torrens with the Penelope House and Detective Zandra Jackson of the Mobile County Sheriff's Office. Ladies, thank you both for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having us.
You know, this program sort of comes out of concern of all of us having when we report these stories, and it seems like more stories reported here in the last month or two where you're wondering if the hot temperatures, the record-setting temperatures had anything to do with it, or the season it is. We talk about some things happening around holidays more frequently. But let's talk about what has been going on. And I guess as we were saying, we need to talk about first defining what domestic violence is. So why don't we start there?
Right. So domestic violence is a general term, and a lot of times it's kind of looking at family violence as a whole. The law kind of interprets it a little differently, but so anytime you see in the news, whether it's a parent and a child or a grandparent and a whatever, that's domestic violence. At Penelope House, our focus is on intimate partner violence. And it can be any kind of intimate partner violence. So when you look at, it could be heterosexual, homosexual, as long as there's that connection.
So people are in a relationship, an intimate relationship.
Yeah, that's our focus.
Okay. And with your office, with your unit in investigation, that?
Well, the new domestic violence laws, well, they're not new, but they have been, they're enhancements that were added in May of 2023. And so based on that, it defines intimate relationships. It also defines parent, spouses, or, you know, if they were former ex, there's no expiration date on when you dated or had it will still be considered the domestic. And so we look at that if children are there under the age of 14, that enhances at the sentencing. So those are what our deputies and law enforcement look at, you know, how are they related? You know, is it grandparent to grandchild or mother to son? So that's how when we respond to domestic, it will come out as a general, but once you get there, if it's two cousins, it's just going to be, you know, just a simple, it's not going to be considered under the domestic law, what the law says.
Right, so as a look at exactly evaluating who it is and what has transpired. Well, let's look at some of the things that have been happening here lately in the last, you know, couple of months, the summer. We can look at the summer season. Give me your impression of what has happened, and is that an uptick or just more publicity to it, or what exactly is going on?
I think it's a combination of that. You know, in the shelter, we'll see times when the census will be real high and when it'll dip and things like that. What we see in the shelter, without fail, and March will be 45 years of service, is we always know that there's a peak in those who need shelter at the end of the school year. Because a lot of times, you know, they parents don't want to disrupt their kids' schedule at the end of the school year.
Right.
So they really want to stick with it, finish school, and then start their new after the school year. So every year, June, July-ish, we're always seeing the peak then as far as shelter.
People making decisions that I'm going to get out of this?
Yeah, I want to get out of this relationship, but I'm trying to keep things as normal and keep school intact as much as possible. So when we make a move, the impact on the family, on the children, won't be as great. The other time we always see a spike, or actually a time that we always see it the lowest, I think Thanksgiving is always when we have the lowest census. And, you know, I remind people that abuse is a choice. So an abuser can choose not to abuse as well. And at Thanksgiving, when you want your turkey and your dressing and all that done, you choose not to abuse at that time to make sure that you have the Thanksgiving that you want. And like I said, year after year, we see that. You know, we do see it climb in December. And again, it's like, for whatever reason, whether it's the victim trying to protect, so I'm not seeking shelter yet, or the abuser not abusing because it's something that he or she wants. When those events kind of pass, we always see a peak in people coming to shelter.
A lot of psychology involved in this.
Yeah.
Detective Jackson, what do you see when you look at what is taking place?
With the Mobile County Sheriff's Department, because we focus, well, we're not focused, but our areas are more rural. So a lot of times in the rural, there's a lot of substance abuse, and when those different perpetrators, whatever type of drug, we normally see increases. Here this past Memorial Day week, Labor Day weekend, there was like a hike where I was called out multiple times over that holiday span, and all of the survivors would say that it's like they possessed, they were on something, like they were superhuman. And so that kind of leads me to believe that when different drugs hit the street or whatever, they get more violent, and there's more violence in those type of relationships. And so that's what I see during my investigation.
And of course, you know, we're hearing a lot about fentanyl, especially through the Sheriff's Department letting us know about some of the busts that you all have made and how much it's even getting into the Metro jail itself too. Is the fentanyl something that's sort of a part of starting the problems with people now, since more people seem to be either experimenting with it and not sure what they're doing, and then they're finding out, because it can lead to overdose as well?
Right. I would say that because I'm not going to say I can speak to it all the way, but just what I see if you have someone that is a substance abuse user, they're just using. So they go by, once they buy that, you know, it just may be more potent than the last time, and then the violence just increases. So with some of the survivors that I have seen, the abuse is like, they had to be really at a stage to where the type of abuse that they inflicted was very horrifying. For someone to even survive that and get out of that. Like, they were literally fighting for their lives, but everyone's story it was like they were possessed, like there was something else in them at the time the assault occurred.
And I was going to say, and a lot of times when people are using substances, you don't think clearly. So your inhibitions to act on something. So like I could, right now, if I'm like, you know, I really could just slap him. I could think that in my head, but I don't do it. But when you're on drugs or whatever,
it intensifies.
No,
and you react on those urges, and then if you're on some kind of drug that like we're talking about, have superhuman strength, although they're inflicting extensive damage, because all of a sudden they've got that
extra push, right.
And I guess probably half the time they have no clue what they are actually doing and how much, until they come off of some of that high.
Until they come down, because a lot of times when perpetrators come to court, it's like they're two different people from the time that it happened to the time, you know, you go through the court system. So it's like they're down. It's like it's not the same person. so to speak.
Now, when you say rural, we're speaking out of the city limits of Mobile. So what areas of the county are you looking at when you look at your numbers?
We have North Mobile County and South Mobile County, so more like areas of Theodore, Grand Bay, Irvington, St. Elmo, and then you go to Wilmer, Chunchula, some parts of Centronel, and up Highway 43 in the Moai area. So yes.
So areas that don't traditionally have their own police forces.
Yes, or
you take care
or
of
we
that.
help like with Centronel Police Department and other smaller agencies. We kind of, we will assist.
Right. In working with Tony Ann and knowing what she's receiving and dealing with, how does the rural compare to the urban area in this county?
One thing about the rural area, and Tony and I were just saying, a lot of times you have land and property, so it's kind of hard to get someone to leave. We encourage them, we encourage that, but it's more like, this is where I live, this is mine, and they're not willing to sometimes do that. So it takes a lot on a deputy or that person to be like, look, this is a dangerous situation, to try to get them to leave. So they may not be as prone to leave because it's something associated with where they are. This is mine, this is my camper, this is my, so it's that special to them that they don't want to give it up because they work so hard to get it.
And especially when you're in a rural setting and it's family property that's been in your family for hundreds of years.
You're not walking away from that.
No, because you walk away and even if you're coming to shelter to be safe, you can't protect your property or your animals or anything else that's there. And someone could light a fire and remove all of that in 5 hours
Through
kind of
their
thing.
anger. That's
Yeah.
Right.
Let's take a break on that. We'll come back and finish that point up, as well as look at some of the other things that are available to help people out here who are dealing with domestic violence. Our very special guest today, we're talking about domestic violence and awareness in our community. We'll have more of Perspectives in just a moment. Welcome back. We're talking about domestic violence this morning. Our very special guest, Tony Ann Torrens with Penelope House and Detective Sandra Jackson with the Mobile County Sheriff's Office. We were talking as we went to break about looking at the difference between the rural and the urban situations, and Detective Jackson explained some of that, as well as what you added in relationship to property and something that may be in their family, not the abuser's family. And so it really puts that victim in a very difficult situation. Talk about what you're seeing in the city now, because you've been, like we say, 45 years of serving the Mobile community. What are you seeing now and today?
Well, and you'll see some similar things as well, because you own your home in the city, many own your home, so it's the same thought process of protecting what you have. But I think a lot of times in the city, there's so many people that are in so close proximity that sometimes it's not the victim who's calling for help. Sometimes it's the neighbor, and sometimes it's a landlord or something like that. We get a lot of calls from people who are saying, how can I help? What can I do? And what we always say is, please give them our crisis number. Because our crisis, we have staff that's on 24 hours a day is taking crisis calls, and they can at least, even if somebody doesn't want to leave, we can talk about ways to be safe in your home. We can talk about legal rights. We can talk about things like that to help encourage them to be as safe as they can be in that situation. So I think in the city, a lot of times you'll see a lot higher numbers because there's a lot more people to help call when there's a problem.
Right. Are you seeing more violent endings to these situations today, or are we seeing where people are pulling back, getting rational, and let's
I know
address this?
we've seen a lot in the shelter and crisis calls, and we've talked about this extensively within our staff, is that, we have seen a lot more with weapons than we've seen in the past. They say the domestic violence is about power and control, and the ultimate way of controlling somebody is when you show you can take their life from them. So when you strangle somebody, put your hands on their neck and take them to the point where they can't breathe and they're just about to pass out, and then you let go. What a sense of, I have power over you. And we are seeing a lot more of that. And when you see someone who's has a history of that, the only thing left to do a perpetrator or abuser can do is kill them.
Right.
That's the next step. So whenever you see someone has a history of that, we try to make sure they understand how serious this is, and let them kind of reflect back on the escalation, you know, because in the beginning it may have started with a slap, and now here you are where he almost took your life, kind of thing.
My goodness. Detective Jackson, when are you called to the scene? Are you initial, or they determine it's a domestic violence situation and then they call you immediately to get you out there?
Based on the severity of it, more or less the felony cases, which would be the strangulation cases, assault second, assault first cases, anything that would be felony in nature. Or there are times when supervisors will call and say, hey, we have this. Maybe the victim did not give them all the details, and they'll call me out. Well, we say they say choke, but it's strangulation.
So physical would be the felony designation when
well, you have different degrees of assault.
Okay.
So there might be a harassment where they were pushed or shoved. That would be handled on the field patrol level. But if there's an incident where I'm called out, it's actually where there's extensive injury to the person or to the property, arson. That's something else that I'm seeing a lot more of, you know, someone burning down a house with all the memories, you know, in it. So,
my goodness.
Yes.
Is that a person who doesn't have attachment to it, doing it to the victim, or it could be
It was the attachment. When you know that this, like she said, you know, it's controlled, like, I'm gonna take everything from you, like nothing, because they've gotten to where once you realize that this isn't what you want as someone who's being in it, and you take the stance to leave, that's like the ultimate disrespect to a perpetrator. So they're gonna do whatever to show you you're not gonna leave me. And once that person finds it in themselves that this isn't what they want, these are the links that perpetrators will go through to try to intimidate the person.
So much to talk about in this area. Let's start, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. Let's start talking about what are you telling people to do who are watching today if they see themselves in this kind of situation?
Tell them to call our crisis line, 251-342-8994, because, you know, we've had people call before and think, I don't think I'm in a situation like that. You know, can I talk to someone? And as they're talking, it's like, you definitely are in that situation. And like I said, sometimes
Another set of ears hearing what's
exactly,
going on.
and it's sometimes, you know, the relationship started beautiful. I mean, Prince Charming and the princess were together, so this didn't start. So somehow this slowly progressed. And so, you know, like I said, it's hard to kind of come to terms with how did I get here kind of thing.
Yes, it is.
So what do you tell people who ask you, should I make a decision about this or what?
Well, what I encourage them to do is that it's a very volatile situation, any type of assault, because that small leads to something bigger, and their life is very important, their children and what they have to do for themselves. So we encourage them, you know, Penelope House is there. We encourage them about the resources that are there to protect them, protection from abuse petitions, how to file those, where to get the help that they need if there's a housing situation. But initially we would tell them, you know, this is, you know, we offer the safe shelter because we want them to be in a safe place. Because we never know, because it puts so many people, domestic violence is one of the dangerous calls that we can go on. You never know. It could be a routine where you go into this call and once that victim says, I'm not doing this anymore, you don't know what state of mind. And we've had cases before where once they leave, they, you know, it could be a law enforcement officer, it could be the victim, it could be the family. So we have to make sure that we express that to them to get to the help and resources that they need, and make sure deputies understand how they are advocates when they get there, what to do and how to direct someone who's in those situations.
And of course, Penelope House, you have facilities where they can bring their children.
Absolutely, yeah. All victims, as long as they have custody of their child, they bring their children with them. And like I said, after COVID, we went to shelter in 1 family unit per room. So we've had several bring in pets with them, because back to the intimidation that abusers use, a lot of times it's you know, they know they love your dog and they'll kill your dog. And, you know, to show you that I have the ability that, you know, to control our situation and you. And so we've had victims who brought their pets in with them simply because they were scared to death that something bad would happen to their pet.
And of course, next month, October, is the Domestic Violence Awareness Month. You're going to be visible to make sure that we get this message out?
Absolutely. We have a display, a domestic violence awareness display that our clients and the children and shelter and staff put together, and it'll be traveling. It'll be at Government Plaza a few weeks. It'll be at Art Walk. It'll be at University of South Alabama, and it ends up at the airport. So, you know, on our Facebook and our website, we'll have all that information forthcoming.
Very important time. And of course, Detective Jackson, do you see adding more people to your unit being a way to do more, or where do you see the unit needing to be able to be even more successful?
Just the support to help, you know, in situations where there might be someone leaving and we need to get, you know, them immediate, like just basic toiletries and things like that to help us. But we're doing a better, well, what we're doing is to our deputies in service training to let them know what to do, how to handle the calls, how to be more or less, you know, understanding and not biased to certain situations, even if it's the same person, you know, just until they do what they do, we're their advocates and we have to make those initial steps. So we're doing more of that to educate our deputies, or the deputies that, you know, my colleagues, to help, you know, in situations where there's abuse.
And I'll say every October we make it a point to recognize law enforcement, because it is the most dangerous call, but they're also keeping victims safe in the situation. And when they bring people to shelter, they're keeping my staff, me and my staff safe, because we've had perpetrators try to show up and things like that. So we recognize them every year and make sure that they're highlighted and understanding the work that they're doing.
We thank both of you for being here today, and of course we'll continue this conversation in the month of October as well. But thank you both, ladies. And of course, there are the phone numbers there to show you very quickly to call the crisis line as well as the national line as well. Of course, we'll be back again next Saturday. Until then, have a great week ahead.